So the beginning of last week, we laid a ground in watercolour over the whole area of paper that we were going to paint on. There was no drawing on it whatsoever. Okay, now the colour I asked everybody to mix up was what? Who remembers what it was? Any offers?
Well, I've got it here.
Raw sienna.
Well done. Yes. And I said, in your case, Chris, it was yellow ochre with a bit of red in it to make the equivalent of a raw sienna. But what I did try and emphasize, and I realized after I'd actually laid my own raw sienna wash, was that the color was quite strong. So I then literally washed off quite a lot of it to get it back to this sort of very pale version of raw sienna. Okay. Now, why I'm saying this is when I started to put I worked from my photocopy. I didn't work from the book, and the colors aren't bad compared to the photocopy. But as I say, when I tried to put blue over the raw sienna, because the raw sienna is slightly yellow, what effect does it have on the blue?
Goes green.
Exactly. It makes it go a bit green.
Yeah.
So I had to compensate for that by using ultramarine blue, which is a ready blue anyway. And I then added in what is essentially a sort of shocking pink that I have, and you may not have. Sorry, it's here. Can you? I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Anyway, it's a sort of shocking pink colour. It's not alizarin crimson, although if you haven't got this colour, you can use alizarin crimson, and it probably will just about give you what you need, which is a sort of a purpley blue. So that when I put that purpley blue over this, it more or less gives me the colour in my photocopy. Okay. Now, the other interesting thing that I want to say about this is, for those of you that are very familiar with the colour wheel, what relationship does yellow have to purple?
Opposite.
Opposite.
Yes, and what do we call that?
Complementary.
Yes, they're complementary, exactly. So I had another think about it, and this morning, and I'd like you to try this out if you've got a small piece of watercolour paper, I'd like you to paint a rectangle of burnt sienna. Now, have you all got burnt sienna?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have got burnt sienna, mix up quite a weak solution of it. I'll show you what this looks like on that piece of paper. I mean, this is, if I show you in the camera, my solution of raw sienna, burnt sienna rather, looks like this. Can you all see?
Raw or burnt?
That's burnt sienna. And if I put a little tiny bit of it on the paper, Shelley, could you mute yourself, please? Nice to see you here. It isn't very strong, as you can see. Sort of like a pale pink. Right? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, pink or burnt sienna, or this, yeah, it's a sort of pinky colour. The relationship of that to this one, which is like an ultramarine, again with a tiny bit of pink in it, they are complementary. Okay?
Yeah.
So the purple and the yellowy colours complementary, which is what I did on my painting and got for my photocopy. But looking at the painting and bearing in mind that in oil painting, traditionally, artists used to lay either a burnt sienna or warm ground or a sort of greeny ground. It's a sort of traditional stain for watercolour painting. Yeah. Now, and bearing in mind that Cezanne is essentially an oil painter, although that doesn't mean you can't do work with other medium. And as we discussed last week, I think this painting that he's done here was a sketch, possibly for a oil painting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the color and the feeling of the way he's used the paint in this particular painting, which is called the Chateau de Medan, and I'm sorry I can't say it, Medan, de Medan. It was done in 1879, has a very sort of direct, free feeling about it, and it looks like a sketch. You know, the watercolor looks like he's rapidly applied it to the paper in order to make a record of what he wanted to do as possibly at a later stage as more developed oil painting, or because possibly he was going to show it to Zola, whose chateau is at the back behind this wall here, you know, with a view to possibly asking him if he wanted an oil painting of it. It was commissioning him to do an oil painting. I don't know. I don't know the facts regarding this painting in any more depth than that. But I think it is interesting, as we found last week, how he's treated the shapes in a very architectural way. There's lots of emphasis on verticality and horizontality in the painting, and it's sort of beginning to fragment, you know, into a sort of cubist style, if you like. I mean, he did sort of examine all aspects of the forms he was looking at, and he wanted to give a truer representation of the subject than has normally been created by artists before him. You know, they were trying to move a step further on.
Mm.
Okay, so that's just a little bit about the colour and a bit about the painting. So what I want you to do, once you've got your little pool of burnt sienna mixed up, will you paint a little rectangle like I've done? Okay, let it dry. Now, the other thing I'd say is I put a bit of masking tape around there, which gave it a nice little margin, like I do with my paintings. And for Margaret's sake, and I don't know whether I've just mentioned this, on nearly every painting I now do, Margaret, I put masking tape around the perimeter of the image so that when I remove it at the end, I am left with a nice finish on the actual painting itself. Okay?
Yeah, I've done that.
Good, lovely. Okay, so paint yourself a little rectangle of the burnt sienna, and then mix up a blue made up with ultramarine and a tiny bit of, if you've got pink, a pinky red, a tiny bit of pinky red, so that it makes it very slightly, well, I'll show you what it looks like in the palette. In the palette, it looks like, I don't know if you can see it, it looks like that. It does look like ultramarine, but it has got a bit of pink in it. So it's more of a reddy blue. So if you have a reddy ultramarine tube, you can use that. You know, there are, I know it's ultramarine comes in different types. You can get a greeny ultramarine or a more reddy ultramarine. Okay. If you have only got a bog standard mid ultramarine, then you need to add a little bit of pink to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to do this as well with you, just so you see what I think this is useful also for when we come to paint. So I'm going to do I'm going to prepare a new rectangle as well. Has anybody got any questions? Is everybody all right with that?
I've rather gone on ahead with my painting, and I'm getting almost just to the dark bit.
Well, that's fine, Sally. That's absolutely fine. What I will suggest that you do, which is what I'm going to do, is once I've finished this one, I'm going to do another bit. I'm going to do another strip, and I'm going to do it on the burnt sienna. So I'm going to see what the difference is.
Okay.
What I did want to say is that, and we'll look at it when we do this exercise. I think he's used a lot of wet into wet.
Mm.
I think he's wet every little area that he's dealing with, dampened it, and then let the colour slightly run into it. And that gives you a sort of, I mean, in particular over here, I don't know if you can see it, but where the greens and the pinks are sort of intermixing and fusing on the actual paper. Yeah.
I agree.
And in the clouds a bit, it's sort of, I mean, I think this is probably a little bit too dark, but, you know, the blue and I did actually drop some sort of pinky colour over the top of that, so they mixed a bit. I think it's the same as happening in the greens. I think he's put it on very directly. The paper's damp, and they fuse together. I think that's you know, and it's quite nice when you're doing it on a coloured ground, because you're not fighting against the white all the time. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got your little rectangle mixed, then you can dry it with a hairdryer. If you haven't got a hairdryer nearby, then I suggest you do, you know, carry on with getting your image traced if you haven't already done so. And if you have done so and you've started painting it, you can carry on with a bit of that. So I'm afraid you're going to have to work with wherever you're from, because everybody is at different stages. But if you could stop whatever you're doing just for 1 minute now and just look at this before I go any further, then you can get on with where you're at. So my bit of burnt sienna is dry. It's pretty pale, but it's slightly pink, you can see, compared to what I had here with the raw sienna. It's a pinker colour, obviously, because the paint is a different pigment. Now, if you have got your blue mixed up, which I've pre-mixed my blue here.
What is that?
It's ultramarine with a tiny, tiny bit of pink in it.
Oh, right. Oh, that's purpley then.
Pardon?
Mine's gone purple.
Then you put too much red in. Put some more ultramarine in. On the paper, it looks like this. Sorry, that one there.
Oh, very pale.
Well, it is pale. Yes, it is pale. But when you put it over here, it won't be so pale.
Okay. More water, do you think?
More water and more ultramarine.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Sue is being very good and watching every last thing I'm doing, which is marvellous, because she's going to then move very quickly, because that's what she tends to do. Okay. Now, before you do a single painting of this blue onto the pink, what I did with another brush was to get some water on a separate brush, okay, clean water on the separate brush, and then I literally just put in some water onto the surface of the burnt sienna like that. Did you see that? Yeah. And if you look at it, if you hold which you can do with a nice small piece of paper, you hold it up and you look at it, you'll note that it's shiny. Okay? No, it's shiny. Now, that means that if I put the paint onto it at this point, it's going to go everywhere. So although I don't want to dry it, I want it to remain damp. I just can dab it a bit with a paper towel. And at this point, it's probably, now if I look at it in the light, it's not so shiny. It's gone more matte. I don't know if you can see, if I turn it, it's gone more matte. It's now at a point where I can actually apply the paint onto it and it won't go out too much out of control. Right? And I think this is how he's approached the whole painting. So you then get, and you can go back with your damp brush that's just got water on it, and you can, if you want to, just soften the edge of that blue with the damp water. And I think that's just about it, you know, to get the kind of cloudy shapes, okay? I think that is the technique he has used in this painting. I think he's dampened the area that he's going to work on with the colour, and then he's dropped the colour in. And what's so lovely about putting this ultramarine blue mix over the burnt sienna, which is so pale and pink, because they're complements, the burnt sienna is going towards the blue, and the blue is going towards the burnt sienna, and they kind of work, they kind of glow, and they create a sort of, not exactly a zing, but I can't exactly explain it. They work together, those two colours. And that's what tends to happen with complementaries. Complementaries, when you use them together, create this sort of harmony. And we found it in the drawing classes when we've used complementaries as an exercise. And I think you can see it, you know, operating in this particular painting with his, because the colours he's used are mostly complementary. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So when you've done that and you can see that it's, you know, got the kind of feeling you want. And I mean, the only reason I did it was because I thought, well, how on earth has he got this this blue over the background colour? The other thing I think, and I don't want us to particularly go down this road, but over on the right, it looks as though there may even have been some, dare I say it, Chinese white mixed in with the blue.